Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today we have on Scott Horton, who is probably, I don't want to play favorites, but definitely in my top favorite guests of the Tatiana Show. He's been on several times. He is the source of anti-war information. I know no one who is more informed and who is more anti-war than Scott. He has contributed incredibly to the libertarian space and beyond. He has this great book. I highly recommend you guys check it out. It's called Fool's Errand. It gives you all the inside information about what the F is going on in Afghanistan. It's super detailed, great read. He has a lot of other things that he can talk about. You know, he's got the Scott Horton Show, he's got the Libertarian Institute, but we definitely want to dive in. So hello, Josh. Welcome to the show, my co-host.
Hello, Tatiana.
Excellent. And I like your background. It looks more impressive every time. And welcome to the show, Scott. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
Hey, I'm happy to be here with you guys always, of course.
Awesome. Super cool. So we've got most of the intros out of the way. And so before the show started, we were thinking about what exactly is it that we can talk about today? Obviously, we have the election, we have Biden, we have Trump. It's a little bit exhausting talking about the election, but it's relevant. And it's extremely relevant in the world of war. Although some would say that Trump has dropped more drone bombs than Obama. I've read that before. I'm not sure if that's still up to date. So I don't know. Who is the anti-war president? I would say it's certainly Trump. So you want to give us some insights, Scott? What are you thinking about all the stuff that's going on in the U.S. right now? Are we headed towards civil war? Or are we just going to keep exporting our wars to other countries?
All right. Well, okay. So last thing first there, as far as the Civil War, no. Because, I mean, America's gone through a hell of a lot of things before without it breaking out into civil war. And if for no other reason, then there's just too much, virtually permanent power invested in our sheriff's departments, our state police forces. They're not going anywhere. And
what about defund the police? No?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in other words, our states are very permanent and not fragile, and their relationship to the national government is also extremely established. And for example, I'm in Austin, Texas right now. 100 miles up the road from here is the biggest military base in America. Now, that isn't a coincidence. It's like that so that it's not even an option to consider that Texas would ever leave the Union. Texas is part of the Union. Wow. We actually had that fight before, and our fight for independence from the Union was denied, and Texas was defeated and occupied, and then was allowed back in the Union, essentially at bayonet point. And so that question is already settled, and no state in this Union is going to really break away. I mean, but on the other hand, there's something important that, is kind of the background to your question, which is there's such animosity between, the supposed left and the right political factions right now that feels like people aren't willing to suffer under the power of the other side. When sort of the first premise of democracy is that when you lose, hey, better luck next time. And you accept your loss. And because, impregnant in that is the idea that the power that you're fighting over is marginal, that you're not fighting over the power of life and death over your fellow man on every question. That what's up for election, what's up for debate is, who's going to sit on the water company board or, whatever, how much money gets, funneled to whatever kind of local civil projects or these kinds of things. There's so much power at stake that it makes people hate each other. So the solution to that, of course, isn't civil war, but it is massive decentralization of power. And here's the funny joke, right? I've always said for a very long time that if we just went by the US Constitution itself, that would be about 90% of the way to anarcho-capitalist libertarianism from where we are right now.
Yeah.
Right. And they've essentially just ignored the Constitution out of existence. But the Constitution actually describes a limited federal republic where states can do things different ways and where all these questions are not decided by the Congress, the president, and the Supreme Court, but they're decided on a much more local level. So here's the other rub in all of that is the major differences between all the Americans right now on the left and right culture war issue. It's not North and South or East and West or even black and white, right? It's town versus country. In every town and every country in America, right? In the town, they're all a bunch of urbane liberals who watch these channels. And in the country, they lean right and watch the other stuff. And they and listen to the different music and whatever and have this cultural war and cultural divide. But you can't make a war out of that. And in fact, it goes also to the point that you don't need to. Like, there's nothing to fight about, right? Like those liberals in Austin, they're not going out to the countryside to pick a fight with these right wingers that they're sure to lose. What are they going to do about that? They're not going to do that. If they control the people in the countryside in Texas, it's through the state legislature, same as it's always been.
But when
And the
there's
people
someone
from the
getting,
countryside, they're not forming a militia to come into town and start executing liberals over whatever the hell it is. They're going to beat them in the legislature, just like they always do.
I mean, they are trying to kidnap.
The status quo will hold, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for better or for worse. You're not going to see a real breakdown here. Go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, what about the governor? There was a kidnapping attempt. You know, there is these sorts of things which can
that was an entrapment job.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, and even if that wasn't an entrapment job, which I think it very clearly was, that these guys are a bunch of bumbling idiots. If they're dumb enough to think that they could kidnap the governor, there is no chance they were going to get anywhere near her. You know, they're going to blow up a bridge and all this stuff like out of some novel. Come on. This is all FBI. Just like when they entrapped 350 lower end of the IQ Muslim youth in this country since September 11th into these fake terrorist attacks.
Yeah, it's always these patsies.
The Liberty City 7 and the Portland Christmas plot and the New Jersey pizza plot and the JFK airport fuel depot plot. All this is all made up by the FBI. But, you know, there are like far right wingers and that kind of deal. You know, there could be problems, but even that's one governor out of 50. And if they had done the very worst, had kidnapped and murdered her, some crazy thing like that, well, the lieutenant governor would have become the governor. And as horrible as that crime would have been, the state of Michigan would not have been destabilized in any real way. And the local sheriff in every county in Michigan would still be the boss. And any militia guy who wanted to really try that premise would find out the hard way that he's got reinforcements. And in fact, look at where at these pro-Trump protests, guys show up with rifles and go, yeah, stop the steal. And then the local sheriff deputy comes up and says, come with me. And he goes, okay. Because what's he going to do? Shoot a sheriff's deputy at a protest over a ballot? No, he's not. What does he do? He puts his hands up. Go ahead, take my gun. And then I don't even know if they took the guy to jail. The video I saw, they didn't take him to jail. They just walked him to his car. So we're not going to do armed protests here today, sir. Bye. And he left, you know.
But you have kind of more pressing issues, right? Like, what if they ask for forced vaccinations? You've seen a huge spike in gun purchases. And now you've got people that basically are saying that this is not a real election. And if Trump actually ends up pulling it off and taking it, then the left is going to go bonkers. I mean, they've literally been lighting things on fire. I agree that it's a far cry from, you know, like a bunch of riots.
But Trump ain't going to win. It's over, Tatiana. He lost, dude. He can't, there's no court case in America that's pending that's going to swing the vote to him right now. It's done. It's everything but the concession, but he cannot win at this point. So that's not the question. You know, he's going.
I don't know. I've been seeing plenty of stuff around that.
See, he doesn't have any power. You think about like a third world country where president wants to refuse to leave or something. Well, he controls the army. It's his private army. But in America, it's just not that way. There's not one cop in Washington, D.C. that's going to side with Donald Trump after the Electoral College has voted him out. You know, there's not one cop who's going to say, you know, I'm with you, sir. Let's fight it out. Just forget it. It's over. It's done. America supports every banana republic in the world, but America's not a banana republic on this level of whether we're going to have a peaceful transfer of power. I mean, look at who is Trump's armed force in DC. He has none. The armed force in Washington is the Department of Justice, and it is its own Leviathan, and it obeys the commands of the president, not the last president or whoever wishes he was still the president or says so. They're going to follow the law. That's as simple as that. And so you're not going to have the leftists rioting over Trump staying in, because he's not staying in. And I think if there's right-wing violence in response to them believing that it was stolen from him, which I think he stole it from himself more than anything, by the way. But if there is some, it would be very marginal. It would be limited circumstances, and those could be tragic. Like, you're talking about they could have done something to this governor or whatever, something violent. I mean, something like that could happen. But in terms of disrupting society in a way where, like, we're going to go on as though Joe Biden, as though there's a question of whether he's really the president or not, or something like that. Nah. And after all, he has all of the entire American establishment and media behind him. And so,
well, that's terrifying.
That counts for a lot.
So, all right. So you don't think there's civil war? I'm like medium on that one. And I also think that Trump may still win, but we don't have to get into that, because the bigger picture is, if Biden goes forward, what do you think is going to happen with international relations before all, the elections? The Biden laptop from hell came out. We have evidence of him taking bribes. He's like hiding, family molestations and stuff. So it seems like he has a lot of relationships with China and other countries. How is that going to affect America's international foreign policy?
All right. Well, so first of all of the wars that Trump inherited from Obama / Biden, are still on. And so Biden is only going to inherit them back again. Afghanistan, there's still even some drone bombings going on in Pakistan occasionally, but especially in Somalia, in Yemen. Still have troops in Syria and in Iraq, and still going on combat missions. And they have been this whole time. And like you said before about the accusations that Trump has done more drone strikes in the same time period than even Obama, that's true. And I mean, than even Obama. That's right. What Donald Trump did as soon as he came into power was he loosened the rules of engagement as loose as he possibly could under the law.
What does that mean?
And he devolved. That means that the Obama government had put all these restrictions on when you can fire and who you can kill in which districts of which countries at which time. And you had to go up this complicated chain of command and check all these boxes and make sure, not that they really made sure, but to try to make sure to keep civilian casualties at a minimum, not because they care, but because they're counterproductive. You want to, as they called it, you want to use these drones as a scalpel and get just the bad guy in a way that doesn't create more animosity against you. That doesn't work, but that was, the name of what they were trying to do there. But so Trump canceled all of that. Trump said, as far as the law is concerned, the lowest level commander on the battlefield has all the authority that he can have to call in these strikes. Remember when they dropped the mother of all bombs on so-called ISIS fighters in eastern Afghanistan in 2017? And the media said that this was a big demonstration to North Korea and all this stuff by Trump. No, it was not. Trump did have not a thing to do with that decision. All Trump did was he authorized the Special Operations Command to do whatever the hell they wanted. And so what happened was, a week before, 2 Green Berets had been killed fighting in the Nangarhar province. And that mother of all bombs, that was the local SOCOM commander saying, let's drop the Moab on them as revenge. And they just did it, because that was the degree to which Trump devolved the authority down to the lowest level possible with the broadest amount of authority to strike that they possibly could. Because, Tatiana, you probably heard of this, right? There's truth to this. Yeah, not that they would have won anyway, because they would not. But there's truth to the idea that Lyndon Johnson during Vietnam imposed all of these meticulous restrictions on the way the men could fight. And that was because they were fighting not really against North Vietnam. They were fighting against guerrillas in South Vietnam that wouldn't accept the regime they were trying to install. So they're trying to win hearts and minds and all this. So, but the mythology was, again, with truth in it, that our men were made to fight with one arm tied behind their back. At the highest level, Lyndon Johnson, the president, was nitpicking their rules of engagement to the point where they were basically helpless to defend themselves and this kind of thing. And this was a powerful narrative that came out of the Vietnam War. And so Trump and other presidents have done this too, but Trump was determined, and no one was going to say that anything bad that happened in the wars was because he didn't give the military enough authority to whoop ass. That was not going to be the truth. And he made a deal with, for example, when he came into power, it was in the middle of Iraq War III, the war against the Islamic State, which Obama had helped to build up. And then, oops, they conquered all of Western Iraq. And so we had to start another war to try to destroy him again. Well, Trump came in to the third year of that, basically. And he told his Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, gloves off, man, hammer him. A war of annihilation. Mattis said, we want to wage a war of annihilation. And Trump said, that sounds good to me. Yeah, do that, right? So here's why you're confused, right? Is because Trump has this sort of bizarro world kind of funhouse mirror version of Ron Paul shtick going on, where it's not that he's a peacenik. It's not that he cares about casualties, although he does actually from time to time mention civilian casualties in the other countries, unlike a lot of these presidents. I will give him credit for that. But it's not that he really cares about these things in a principled way like Ron Paul does. It's just that he doesn't believe in this mystical destiny of America to lead the world in this kind of abstract and metaphysical way, the way the rest of these people do. You know, Madeleine Albright, Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, she said, America must lead because we stand taller and we see further into the future and we know what to do. This is American exceptionalism. Donald Trump doesn't believe in things, right? Donald Trump is just Donald Trump. He's a golfer, Sean Hannity fan. You know, he doesn't know stuff. And he certainly is not impressed by a bunch of crap about how it's our destiny to defend Japan forever. What? That is stupid, right? You're scoffing. You should. Well, he scoffs too. And so you get kind of an impression that he actually wants to do something about it, or would be willing to do something about it. But that's just not true. It's just not true. When it comes down to it, these past 4 years, he's spent being 2/3 tough guy, macho ass kick, and 1/3, let's see if we can try to make a little bit of peace. So he did talk to Kim Jong-un in Korea, and he did, to his credit, and it's almost a magic wish. It's impossible to believe almost. He got Zalmay Khalilzad, the neoconservative Mandarin, like who's a textbook definition, real ass neoconservative, student of Leo Strauss and everything, to negotiate a peace deal with the Taliban to withdraw from Afghanistan. I mean, you couldn't make that shit up, Tatiana. I swear to God. In my book, I said, don't negotiate, just leave. Because I couldn't conceive of a situation where the Americans would actually shake hands with the Taliban and say, okay, you beat us, better man won, we're leaving now. I mean, that just sounds impossible to me. But yet he did it. Donald Trump did that. And he got Khalilzad to do it for him. I mean, holy crap. So that's great. But at the same time, he's committed genocide in Yemen every single day of his presidency. From January 20, 2017 to right now, he could have ended the war in Yemen with a spoken word, with the flick of his little magic marker. And instead, what'd he do? He vetoed. I mean, you wouldn't even believe that this could be possible, right? For the first time since they created the thing, the Congress invoked the War Powers Resolution to force him to end the war. And he vetoed it. And then he justified it by saying, oh, the Saudis spend so much money. Like, that's who the American people are. Between Canada and Mexico is where you find the mercenary folk who just murder Yemeni babies for dollars. That's our mystical destiny in the world now, I guess, according to Donald Trump. And then he just tells the most absurd lies. And who knows whether, how much of this is him embellishing or how much of this is them blowing a bunch of smoke up his ass in the first place. But he says, no, it's worth it because they're going to spend $450 billion in America. And that's going to create 1 million jobs. It's such a lie. Give me a break. They're going to spend $10 billion and create 5,000 jobs. And that'll buy you a genocide against the poorest country in the Middle East. You know, Donald Trump, all other things being equal, and believe me, I hate his enemies as much as anybody. But for what he's done, he belongs in a supermax cell. He ought to be sharing a cell with Barack Obama for the rest of their lives for what they've done to the people of Yemen. And it's not just that the war is bad, it's that the war is designed to inflict famine and death on civilians. That's the purpose of the strategy and the tactics of the war, is to destroy the civilian population of the country.
But
That
why?
is genocide.
But why?
Well, for
Why
money.
would they want that? Which money? Oh, is it like oil money?
The Saudis are mad that a faction they don't like took over the capital city. The Americans don't really care. The Americans, Tatiana, when the Houthis took over the capital city of Sana'a at the end of 2014 and the beginning of 2015, Obama's military started working with them. They said, hey, you guys hate Al-Qaeda, right? And the Houthis were like, hell yeah, we hate them. They hate us. And the Americans said, well, how about we give you intelligence and you use it to murder these Al-Qaeda guys? And the Houthis said, let's work together. And the military said, all right, let's do it. And they put a story in the Wall Street Journal about it. And this is January 2015. And they put a story in Al Monitor. In fact, it was Barbara Slavin reported that the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, General Michael Vickers, came and gave a presentation at the Atlantic Council where he explained the whole thing. We now have this de facto sort of working with alliance with the Houthis to kill Al-Qaeda guys. Well, just 2 months later, Barack Obama turned around and took Al-Qaeda's side against the Houthis because the Saudis wanted the Houthis gone. And as Obama's government told the New York Times, well, we wanted to placate the Saudis because we were doing the Iran nuclear deal that they were against. Why is that? Here we're locking down Iran's nuclear program, triple more than ever before, and they're against it. We're securing their security needs. We're protecting them, but they're against it because they're afraid that Obama's going to start tilting back toward Iran. And they don't want that. And so they say, prove that you're not by helping us attack Yemen. So Obama says, okay. And that's the Obama government's version of the story. That's what they told the New York Times was why they did it. Put in quotes, audience, put in quotes in your search engine, placate the Saudis. And there it is, New York Times, right there. In the same paragraph, it says, they knew that the war would be long, bloody, and indecisive. In other words, they couldn't even define victory. Indecisive means they had no rational picture of how this war might end up in a way that would be beneficial to America, Saudi, or anybody else. And then they did it anyway. And then what does Trump come and do? Trump comes in and he continues it every day of his presidency. And what did America get out of it? What did he get out of it? He lost anyway. You think of all the compromises he made to not piss off the Saudis and not piss off the Israelis. When he could have financed the entire Republican Party's congressional campaigns himself. He has enough money in the bank. He's going to be dead within 10 years, max. He has enough money. He could have financed the entire Republican Party himself and told the Israelis, I don't need your money. Told the Saudis, I don't need your money. And done the right thing. But the reality is that, he ain't even Rand Paul, much less Ron Paul. The guy's this deep, right? He doesn't read. Think about this, Tatiana. The whole time that the FBI and CIA were framing him for treason with the Russians, the most ridiculous hoax in American history almost, right up there anyway, for 3 years. It's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. It's like the way when they lied us into Iraq. It's fucking unbelievable. Yeah. Iraq is a threat to us? Donald Trump is a guilty traitor with the Kremlin? Like, this is crazy bullshit. Crazy. This is unbelievable bullshit on the level of the greatest lies of all time. Yeah. Anyway, so what does Trump do for 3 years while they're pretending to investigate him? He tweets out, hoax, witch hunt, unfair, when? For 3 fucking years. Meanwhile, you got at least a solid handful of journalists, right? Like 8 or 10 really good journalists who are constantly debunking Russiagate, debunking every aspect of it, debunking Papadopoulos, debunking Carter Page, debunking Jeff Sessions, debunking Mike Flynn, debunking the Trump Tower meeting, debunking the DNC hack of the server, and the WikiLeaks in the first place, debunking all of it. And what does Trump tweet out? Witch hunt, unfair, because he doesn't know the first thing about his own situation. He doesn't know anything because he's too lazy and stupid to even read at all. Look at his Twitter, Tatiana, look at his Twitter. He follows like 10 people. Well, how in the hell is he going to know anything other than what he's watching on CNN and Fox News, which won't tell you anything? And so, and look, when I said he stole it from himself, let's talk about that for a second. The Democrats, okay, we got the virus this year. Like it or not, you got the lockdowns, you got people staying home, social distancing, and all of these things, right? Pre-existing conditions and who knows what. You have basically a whole new regime of elections in America this year. It's going to be the deluge of absentee and mail-in balloting. And the Democrats are going to get their way on bringing more and more people in to vote because it's going to be so easy to vote. They're going to drop all the restrictions and make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to vote. Okay, so then what does Donald Trump do? He comes up with this plan that's not a plan. He goes, well, I'm just going to denounce mail-in voting for a few months. And I'm just going to essentially assert that all mail-in voting is fraudulent and unfair. But it's actually not fraudulent and unfair. It's just different, and it's not to his advantage. But it's not fraudulent and unfair. It's people voting from home by mail instead of showing up and voting. And there may be some fraud on some thin margins, but that's beside the point.
The attack vectors are broader, right?
So he spent months just demonizing mail-in voting altogether. But he didn't have a plan for then what? Once election night comes and these ballots start coming in, what does he think is going to happen? That the secretaries of state of these states and all the judges and everybody is just going to believe him or something and throw all these boxes out? What did he think is going to happen? That he could just essentially like insult and smear mail-in voting until it would just somehow go away? He had no plan. That was step one. Step one, cast doubt on mail-in voting. Step two, question mark, like the underpants gnomes. Step three, profit, right? He had no plan. But meanwhile, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is, look, everybody, by all means, vote by mail. Everybody knows we're going to kill them on election day because the liberals are more likely to be afraid to go out and vote. They're going to stay home and vote by mail. But not us courageous Republicans. We're all going to go and vote at the polls. But you know what? For all the people who are old or have pre-existing conditions or are, likely to be more susceptible to the germ, but you lean right, you want to vote Trump, by all means, vote Trump, everybody. Let's beat them in mail-in ballots and on election day too, right? That's all you had to do is just be positive and say, come on, guys, let's beat them at their own game. And instead, what did he do? He suppressed his own vote for months. He told his own people, if you don't want to vote on election day, fuck it, don't vote at all. Because the last thing you want to do is vote by mail, because everybody knows that's how you get the cooties. Everybody knows that voting by mail is fraudulent and terrible and wrong. And so I swear to God, he must have cost himself 3 percentage points in every state in the union with that shit.
Wow.
Look, old people skew Republican and old people skew afraid of the germ. He should have been telling them, man, if you're a member of the AARP, then I'm talking to you. Mail that ballot in. Let's get this Action Jackson going right now. And no, he just shoots himself in the foot. And frankly, why? It's because, Tatiana, he's a bad person. Because he's the kind of guy who thinks that if he just bullies people around, that everything will end up working out his way. He doesn't even need a plan that makes any sense whatsoever. He's just going to bully people and demean people and smear people and insult people. And at the end of the day, somehow those ballots are going to disappear. Well, what the hell kind of stupid plan is that? So he won on election day, and then he lost once they counted the mail-in ballots, which, by the way, it was Republican legislatures that refused to update the rules to allow them to start counting the absentee mail-in ballots on election day or even before, and said, no, they have to wait till after election day. And the reason they did that was for just this reason. In fact, and again, just to be clear for your audience too, I still hate the Democrats more. You just heard me on the Russiagate thing. If it's up to me, I'd outlaw the Democratic Party after the Russiagate thing. I hate them. To me, every Democrat burned Waco. That's how much I hate all of them. So I'm not saying that. I'm not taking their side. I'm just being honest here. I'm Howard Cosell calling the score. I'm not a partisan here. I'm a libertarian, you know, but anyway, I forgot my train of thought, but just the point being that the guy sabotaged himself essentially through his own arrogance. And also now look at what he's done. He's just appointed anti-war guys to take over the entire Pentagon. He just fired like the top 6 guys at the Pentagon, put all his loyalists in there, including the great anti-interventionist conservative Douglas McGregor, who if there's one guy who could really get us out of Afghanistan by Christmas, that's your man right there. But man, why didn't he appoint McGregor instead of John Bolton back in 2017 when he got rid of McMaster, or 2018 when he got rid of McMaster? Why didn't he appoint McGregor? Why didn't he purge the Pentagon and appoint his loyalists to the Pentagon last June? He could have ended Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and by November, he would have been Trump the Great. And Joe Biden, I mean, talk about throwing a nuclear hand grenade into the Democratic Party by forcing Joe Biden to attack him from the right and for daring to make peace and pull our troops out of the wars like he promised, which would have absolutely just destroyed the Democratic coalition. The entire left half of the Democrats, they already hate Joe Biden anyway because of what a right-winger he always has been. He's the credit card company's man. This is another major mistake of Trump's. Trying to smear, again, with the bullying and the smearing and the lying. He tries to smear Joe Biden as a communist. But Joe Biden's one of the most famous American politicians for generations. Everybody knows Joe Biden. He's not a communist. He's a right-winger. If he was one hair to the right, he would be a Republican. And everybody knows that about him.
Well, Kamala is a communist.
I'm sorry?
Kamala seems pretty commie to me.
No, Kamala Harris is Hillary Clinton. She is a right-wing Democrat. She was a prosecutor, and then she was the Attorney General of California. I mean, if you're talking about like these woke-isms about transgender, whatever, this and that, that's not where it's at. That's all just a bait and switch, okay? Real leftists care about bank bailouts and imperialism, right? It's the liberals who are glomming onto all this BS identity politics stuff because that's how they change the subject. But by liberals, Tatiana, you got to understand, I mean centrists. Liberals means the Democrats, and the Democrats are not socialists or communists. The Democrats are the party of Wall Street and Delaware, just like our new president-elect. I mean, Delaware is known as the Cayman Islands of the United States of America. It is the state with the absolute loosest and best. Hey, I mean, if I had a company, I might incorporate there myself too. But I'm just saying, this is the corporate headquarters state of all the most powerful corporations, or many of the most powerful corporations in America, because of the way the laws are set up there. And he's been their senator for 50 years. He's straight up. People joke about how the congressman ought to have to wear suits like the NASCAR track suits with all their sponsors all over them. Joe Biden's would be all banks and credit card companies. And he's the guy who made it illegal for you to declare bankruptcy over credit card debt, unless you jump through 100 impossible flaming hoops or whatever it is. Right? I mean,
Okay.
This is the guy,
top bloke.
and he's the guy who was behind in all through the 1980s and 90s. He attacked, get this, he teamed up with Strom Thurmond, the former Klansman, Dixiecrat, the most right-wing, he switched from Democrat to Republican, but the most right-wing member of Congress, to the right of Jesse Helms even. And he was Joe Biden's partner in attacking Ronald Reagan for 8 years for being soft on crime and drugs and demanding they create the drug czar. Joe Biden pioneered mandatory minimum prison sentences, pioneered civil asset forfeiture, pioneered the spending of tens of billions of dollars to build more prisons and hire more cops across the country to, build up the entire war on crime. Then, like I said, on the corporate side, always pro bailout, anti-consumer and pro banker and credit card company. That's his really whole career. And on every war since Iraq War I, he's been bad. He voted against Iraq War I, but then he was embarrassed that he had to live that down because what a great war. And so he made sure to be pro-war after that, was for Kosovo, was not just for Iraq War II, but helped Bush get us into Iraq War II. He was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee who held the bogus hearings, no dissent allowed, no Scott Ritter allowed to say that this whole thing is a lie. Only Hawk's allowed to testify about why we have to do it. And
Scott, one question. You know, you're a very learned guy. You know a lot about a lot of these wars, and a lot of these wars are based around information wars, where you really control the flow of information. And it feels like a lot of we're in a disinformation age. We tend to not really see truths anymore, or half truths. There's a lot of censorship. There's a lot of you just don't know what's going on anymore. And for instance, you ask anybody about Biden's history, nobody knows. Nobody knows, even though you said he's one of the most famous politicians in America. Whenever I talk to anybody, Americans, they're like, I don't know, he's just not Trump. And he's going to bring us back together. He's going to unite us. He said they just repeat these stuff. And it goes so far. Like, how do you think this is being orchestrated? Because, of course, we have media moguls that own vast amounts of media interest, but also big tech. But how are they all being sort of puppet mastered? Is there a conglomerate of people that are sort of controlling the narrative?
I'll tell you something, man. I mean, this is I learned an important lesson after the Oklahoma City bombing. And yeah, I'm a proud Oklahoma bombing truther to this day, because the real story is it was a bunch of neo-Nazis who did it, but they were all undercover informants for the FBI, state's witnesses, and this kind of thing. So they were totally, compromised by the Department of Justice, but they compromised the Department of Justice right back. And so when they got away with the bombing under the FBI's nose, they just covered up the whole thing and blamed it on the one guy and his friend. And, I always knew they were lying all along. And so did a lot of people from the very beginning. And in fact, if people look at libertarianinstitute.org on the right-hand side of the page there, you will find the ultimate Oklahoma bombing archive. No kooky BS, only straight up stuff. There, it's libertarianinstitute.org/OKC. But anyway, so I was a senior in high school at the time. And this really helped to solidify my kind of conspiracy theory take on the world. I don't know exactly if it's, pardon me, the Freemasons or the Skull and Bones or the Rockefeller Council on Foreign Relations, blah, blah, blah type, right-wing conspiratoid take from the 90s. But there's clearly some kind of secret network of power that beyond just the government, that allows for a story like this to be quashed. And it's just incredible. I mean, they never held a single hearing in Congress. Can you believe that? They never held one hearing in Congress about the Oklahoma bombing. And then they never ran one news story about how they never held one hearing in Congress about the damn story. And they never follow this. And there would be, the AP would do a good bit here, and Dan Rather would do a good bit there, and a little bit of truth to come out on 2020. But nobody's ever putting the thing together and really telling the truth to the people. And I thought that, look, like this proves the conspiracy theory stuff is right. Because otherwise, like, how do you control every newspaper editor in America and get them to go along with this like this? Right. But then the answer is because I was a smarter high school senior than my newspaper editor was as a newspaper editor. That essentially, just like with almost everybody, it's a matter of, in-group peer preference and consensus. You don't need conspiracy because everybody knows the FBI is great and everybody knows what the FBI says is true, or else why would they say it? And the people who think in such conventional ways are the people who man those newsrooms. They wouldn't have got hired in the first place if they really saw it another way. It's the same thing if you watch, a great example of this is if you watch your local news channel and the very pretty nice lady says, yeah, the cops killed a guy today. He clearly had it coming and our cops are heroes. And the guy was obviously the aggressor, even though we don't know anything except what they're telling us right now, right? But she just takes their side because that's her job. And she doesn't feel like, man, my job is to be a henchman for the state and to smear some dead guy before any facts are known or what. She doesn't think of it like that. She's doing a good job. So it's that exact same thing extrapolate it out? How do you get the editor of the Miami Herald and the Houston Chronicle and the Dallas Morning News and the Seattle Post Intelligencer and the Toledo Blade? And I'm picking the mid-ranked papers here, the Rocky Mountain News. How do you get them all to just ignore McVeigh's friends? And the answer is, well, the FBI never told them about McVeigh's friends. And the only guy who ever did tell them about McVeigh's friends was some kooky skateboarder from Austin who was, going off about it. And so that it must not be right. And so they just ignore it away. And the FBI spokesman says, I just got in a huge fight about this with Charlie Savage, the New York Times reporter, because he came out with this story that said he came out with a story that said that the CIA says that they have a report that says that the Russians might be paying bounties for American scalps in Afghanistan. And I got into it with him about this. And his answer was, and he meant this, I swear to you, he wasn't being cynical and laughing and whatever. This was really his point of view, okay? Was, I never said that the Russians were putting bounties on Americans. I said that the CIA said that they might be. And that is a fact. And so it doesn't matter really. Now, he still, I guess, was implying that he kind of believes that it's true, but he was clear that that was beside the point. That the fact is that the CIA says this might be true, and that is a news story. And so it doesn't matter whether this essentially amounts to a baseless slander against the Russians. And for that matter, obviously, serving the purpose of undermining Trump's ability to pull the troops out of Afghanistan early by bringing the Russians into the mix and saying, oh, yeah, sure, that's what Vladimir Putin wants in the months right before the election, which was going to be, Trump wanted a PR coup there, and they turned it around on him by making him a sucker of the Russians if he did it. And I swear to you, Charlie Savage said to me, that look, man, the question is not whether the Russians did the bounties. The question is whether the CIA said that they might, and I got that right. And so screw you. I didn't get anything wrong at all, and I'm not backing down from my story at all. And it's not necessary that it's true. And I said to him, Charlie, you are Charlie effing Savage, writing a huge story above the fold on the front page of the New York Times, claiming that the Russians are murdering American soldiers in Afghanistan. And you know what that means. You know that people take that as though that means the story's true. And you're trying to hide behind that. The only truth you're standing by is that the CIA said that it might be true. Don't you think that's a bit of a cop-out, dude? When every Democrat and every TV news host on CNN and MSNBC are acting like this is a proven fact that the Russians are murdering Americans in Afghanistan now? Nope, that's their problem.
I used to work at a major news.
I never said that.
I used to work at a major news station, and I think a lot of it comes down to the news really have these 24-hour news cycles now, and it is just super expensive to have true investigative journalists. So they just stick someone in the Parliament House or in the White House or whatever, and they just repeat what's told. It's just much easier, much cheaper. It still gets clicks. Plus, you have this top-tier down hierarchy in news, like Reuters at the top, feeding headlines down, and people just get it. And, the old joke is, where do you hide a dead body? Well, on the second page of Google, because no one ever looks on the second page of Google. So these investigative journalists, they really don't dig deep. They just see, and they retype their stories. And I agree with you on that it's not really that much of a conspiracy, more than just lazy, and it's an economic thing as well.
Yeah. Well, but so you also asked about like what's to be done about it from the news consumers level. And step one, of course, is abandon your dedication to whatever politician and party you like. Because that's just like, as Bill Hicks would say, that's just taking mud and slapping it over or spray paint over your third eye. You're just blinding yourself to true facts. And for me, I hate both sides worse than each other, always. And so if no matter how bad I'm slamming the Democrats, it's never out of really favoritism for the other side at all. If I hate these guys more, that's okay, because I still also hate these guys more than them too. And it doesn't have to add up mathematically. That's just the deal. And then that means that, not that I'm right about everything all the time, but it means that I have a severe force field to protect me from their bullshit because I don't want to believe it. I'm not sitting there trying to be pleased by what they're saying. See, my guy's doing the right thing. I don't feel that way because he's not my guy. And so that way I can crucify Obama, Biden, and Donald Trump and Mike Pence all on the same hill together. It's fine by me.
So,
you know,
every time you come on the show, I start out the show like all excited. We're going to talk Scott. And now I'm like, holy crap, I'm even more depressed than before because
no,
right
it's
now
supposed to be fun.
Well, is it fun
like
that
Bill
we're
Hicks
bombing all these places?
Your third eye.
Yeah, but this happens like year after year after year. You know, there's just more bombings, more deaths. And now with the like nationwide mask mandate and all these lockdowns happening, like as an American, as a human being, a member of the world society, this is completely bananas. And how are we going to fight back? Because everybody's just a little like jellyfish and they believe in Trumpy. And, you know, like, how are we supposed to do anything? You know, we've got 7 minutes until you've got to go. Let me know, like, what is the hope in this? And what should we expect from Biden? What do you think is going to happen there?
Okay, couple rays of hope is Trump was the greatest psyop that God ever invented against the right wing, against the militarism of the American conservative voter, right? I mean, Washington, D.C. and New York City and, you know, Fort Worth, where they make the F-16s, they're incorrigible. But the vast swath of the American right has at least, you know, their jingoism and their exceptionalism and all this stuff that, you know, forms the basis for their foreign policy, you know, their support for aggressive foreign policies has really been undermined by Trump because Trump, you know, Mr. Fake Macho, got up there and said, you know, it's not a matter of weakness. It's a matter of intelligence. These wars are stupid and we shouldn't do them anymore. And the American right, after all you got to do, no matter who you are, no matter whose right-wing uncle you are, all you got to do is look at a calendar and then tell me with a straight face, you thought George Bush's war against 400 terrorists was supposed to last 20 years and spread nothing but chaos for 3,000 miles in every direction. Come on. Everybody knows better than that now. And Trump came and was like, look at me. I am your right-wing alpha dog leader. And I say the Bushes are the worst thing that ever happened to this country. Oh, yeah, man. You couldn't have ever, if you gave me $1 trillion bill and said, all right, Horton, figure out how to do a psyop on the American right to get them good on this shit. I could have never come up with that. We'll get Donald freaking Trump to get up there to denounce the Bush's wars. Cool, man. That happened. That can't be undone. Of course, the leadership of the Republican Party are hawks on everything. So that means there's a huge, and all the money is behind the hawks, of course. So that means there are huge fights to still be had there. But that is a ray of hope. There's been a reordering there. The question is the anti-war right, are they going to let the Republican Party attack Biden for being weak and feckless before our enemies? Or are they going to attack him for being a hawk and say enough already of this stuff? It's time to bring the wars to an end and bring our troops home. And so that should be, I'm praying, and I sure would like to see a massive fight on the right over what's their stance on Biden's foreign policy. He's either too weak or he's far too aggressive. It's one or the other. You have to choose. It can't be both. So, you know, that's definitely one kind of ray of hope here thing. But then as far as like you brought up at the beginning of the show about mandatory vaccines, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to do a massive public relations push as hard as they can for them. But I think that they know, just like with taking guns, they know they just can't. They just can't. There's too many people who will resist. It'll just be too controversial. It'll be counterproductive. People will see it as an assault, as an infringement, even if they don't have politics, even if they're not living on Facebook and whatever different groups that are worried about these kinds of things. Just regular people. Same thing with contact tracing. You know, in some of these countries, like in South Korea, they did this extremely intrusive contact tracing to corral an invisible little virus. And they did. It worked. But Americans ain't going to go along with that. They didn't even really try it. What are they going to do? I mean, I slammed the door in my census worker's face. I'm going to let some contact tracer come and I'm going to be accountable for all of my activities and associations. Me and everybody on my block. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to bother. The same thing with taking your AR-15 and same thing with jabbing you with a needle. They just know that it ain't going to work. Now, they might say your kid can't come to government school.
They're just obeying. Like people are obeying and wearing masks everywhere. It's like a sign of compliance. People are wearing masks outside. I don't want to do that.
Not everybody. And
Man,
so that's the thing. I mean,
90%,
how many?
90% of New Yorkers are wearing masks. It's like they're completely all alone. There's like nobody even told them that you have to wear a mask when you're all alone in the outside, and they're just doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is funny when you see people who are all by themselves, like in a car with the windows up and wearing a mask. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's somebody in the back seat coughing. I don't know. I'll tell you what, I took a plane to Pennsylvania and back, a couple of 4 planes, with the transfers. And I'm glad everybody's wearing masks on there. If people are coughing, I want as few little particulates of moisture full of germs as possible. And in fact, air travel has been essentially very safe because they have such fine HEPA filters in their air circulation systems that they're really able to filter out, 99% of viruses and everything. And so I think air travel is pretty much safe, but, in confined spaces. See, here's my thing about all of this. I think, some people are too cavalier about this thing. It's killed almost 250,000 people already. It's far more dangerous than any kind of flu. But the deal is it's been completely politicized by, of course, the Republicans and the Democrats fighting over, again, the amount of power at stake. But if anybody had even the basic kind of libertarian premise that, well, wait a minute. I mean, South Korea is South Korea, but this is America, okay? And in America, we're free. In America, our politicians don't have the right to put us on house arrest and shit. They wouldn't dare try it. What are we going to do? Put people on house arrest? That's crazy. What they should have done instead.
We're literally on house arrest. No Thanksgiving. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. But so here's the thing, though, is if instead of that, they had said, you know what, we're not mandating anything. We're just truly and honestly asking you, beseeching you to please wear a mask when you're in confined spaces around other people, because you may not know you have this germ and still be spreading it. That's a unique property of this germ. That's how some people are getting sick from it. And so until better medicines are invented or vaccines or whatever it is, be courteous. For God's sake, cover your mouth. And like if I'd been Donald Trump, for example, like actually in his position as the president, I would have been doing everything I could to talk the governors out of this, to try to stop them from doing that. And even explicitly with the warning, it's counterproductive. You're going to provoke a counter reaction that's even worse. Instead, what would be good would be to call all the governors, and for that matter, all the rock stars and country stars and rap stars and movie stars and Billy Graham Jr. and all the Protestant ministers, all the most prominent Jewish rabbis and Catholic priests and cardinals, and say to them, listen, you guys are in a position of responsibility. Would you please ask your flock to nicely cover their mouth? It's an airborne respiratory virus. We want to keep its transfer at a minimum. And if it was all voluntary and no one was holding a gun to your head on any of this stuff, and that was the one reasonable request, cover your mouth, cover your nose, stay home if you're sick. Don't tough it out, please, for other people's sake. If that was all, then it would have been fine. And I bet we'd have had half the number of deaths that we've had.
Well,
that's what
because you have people who are just going, you can't tell me what to do. Hey, nice to meet you, dude. And just, you know what I mean?
There's no respect. That's what Sweden pretty much did. And the funny thing is
I gotta go. I'm so sorry, guys.
Gotta go.
All right.
I talk way too much. I'm sorry. But
all right,
good. You talk good stuff.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right, everybody, tune into the Tatiana Show for more episodes like this. We'll see you next time.
And I'll see you next week.
Oh, sounds good. Looking forward to it. Bye.
Ciao.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.